Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. When people are in the midst of difficulty, in the midst of problems, they ask God to resolve their situation for them, as if the resolution of whatever problem they're having at the moment is going to resolve their difficulties and make life smooth, make life easy, make life non-problematic. What in fact is going on is that no matter how many problems you may have and how many resolutions may come to you, new problems will occur that continually need resolution. There's no end to them. They may be petty, they may be great, but there's no end to them. And the amount of anxiety that they cause you also has no end to it. What will bring about an end to it? What will bring about a finality to the situation that we're in? What will bring about peace? And as long as we are active in trying to manipulate this world of illusion with a purpose for self-motive and the assumption that there will be some kind of gain for us within this world of illusion, we will continuously create more and more problems that need more and more resolutions. The result of the need for something, the result of the desire for something, and the consequence of desire not being fulfilled bring about this situation. We are made up of elements, the same elements that surround us in the world. And the elements within us have an attraction to the elements outside of us, sort of like a magnetism. And this magnetism is constantly attracting things that are outside of us, attracting them to the point where we think we need them and we think we need to make them ours. We need ownership of them somehow. This tendency within man to be constantly in the need of things and to be constantly trying to acquire things leaves man in this great quandary of unresolved situations. And these unresolved situations lead to the anxiety that bothers man, leads to the sleep deprivation that bothers man, leads to the constant gnawing within man as to his need for things. A dervish came into a small town, and people recognized him as being a great soul. And one family invited him into their house. And he had been traveling for a long time, so he took the invitation. And he stayed with them. He blessed them. And there was a joy within the household because he was there. And other people in the neighborhood and in the vicinity got to know him. And there was a general feeling of joy among the people who were able to establish connection with him. The people in the home that was holding him, that were guesting him, were very generous, and they understood the blessing that was coming to them by hosting him. And he would almost every day tell them that it was time to leave. And every day they would say, stay another week, stay another 2 weeks, don't leave. This went on for quite a while. Then finally, one day, he said to them, early in the morning, I have to leave now. I can be found in the valley of lies, but now I have to leave. And he gave them a blessing for themselves and for the entire town. After he left, the town began to become incredibly prosperous. And the town changed from being an average, ordinary town to a town where people would come from all over to visit and trade and bring goods. And it became a center of commerce. And because it became a center of commerce, all the people in the community did really well. The people in the community recognized that it was the blessing of having this great dervish amongst them and his blessing on the town that made it happen. And they continued to look for him. They wanted to thank him. And he was nowhere to be found. Years passed by, and he was nowhere to be found. Finally, many years later, one of the people from the town was walking by a cemetery, and he saw a man sitting in there, and he was old and disheveled. And he walked over, he was going to help him, and the man turned, and it was the dervish. And when he looked at the dervish, he saw that light in his eyes, that purity in his eyes, that wisdom in his eyes. And he thanked him for all of the kindnesses and all of the things that he had done for the town. And he said the town understood that it was his blessing that made them prosperous. And he said, but you told us you were going to go to the Valley of Lies. We all looked for the Valley of Lies. We couldn't find it. And he sat and he looked at the man and he said, you see that gravestone over there? That man said that he owned the largest building in town. You see the gravestone over there? That man put a fence around an orchard and said that everything within that orchard was his. You see that gravestone over there? He said he owned the most important store in town, and he did more business than anybody else. These are all lies. I'm living in the Valley of Lies. And this is where all of the people who have lied their entire time on earth come. And it's like that. As long as we are entranced by, susceptible to, and partake of all of the illusory fascinations that are thrown at us, and we accept them as real, and we try to manipulate them so that they somehow come into our ownership, we are going to be in a constant circle of trauma and drama and difficulty. We have to be able to take a step back and release ourselves from the ties of illusion, release ourselves from the magnetisms of illusion, release ourselves from that which binds us to this world and holds us in place in this world and doesn't allow us to transcend the material world and go into the non-material world, the non-manifest world. As long as we are tied to this world, we will continue to suffer from the anxiety that the world creates through unresolved situations. There is no resolution to the situations in the world. They just go from one to the next to the next. You know, our memories only go back so far. We have to rely on history in order to explain to us what has happened prior to our birth and into ancient times. But let's go back in recent history. At the end of World War I, around 1919, 1918 or so, it was called the War to End All Wars. And it was expected that when this war ended, we would enter into a relative peaceful state in the world and a relative state where there would be no wars. From 1919, it took approximately 30 years before another world war started. World War II started. From the time World War II ended, how long did it take before the Korean conflict started? 2 years? And since then, how long has it taken for other conflicts to start in the world? How many wars are going on all the time? Right now, there are wars in Syria. There's wars in Libya. There are wars in certain parts of Africa. It's a never-ending cycle of power trying to assert itself, dominion trying to assert itself, and conflict coming about because of this tendency. What can we do? What do we have to do? We have to turn inward, inside of ourselves, and release ourselves from all the ties that bind us to this illusory world. We have to relieve ourselves from all of our connections to this illusory world. The time span that we are given here has a limit, but nobody sees that limit, nor does anybody understand that limit. And everybody acts within this world as if there were no limit. A wise man was once asked, "Can there ever be peace in the world?" And his response was, "When every man is capable of seeing his own death and seeing the death of everyone around him, there is then going to be the opportunity for peace in the world. But until people are able to see that, they will be blinded by the veils of ignorance that deny them the ability to see reality, and they only see illusion. And illusion pretends that life never ends. Illusion pretends that this is an ongoing scenario without a finality. It's one of the great lies. It's one of the biggest lies in existence. Yet, man doesn't seem to be able to grasp it. Why do men who are close to 80 years old still want to become president of the United States? Why do men near the end of their time want to still grasp more power? What is it that stops them from receding into themselves and learning about the truth of reality? What's the difference between the politician and the monk? Well, we should all ask ourselves that question. What's the difference between the politician and the monk? And who has a better grasp of reality? Who better understands things in the way that they truly are? Part of our problem is that we have doubt. We have doubt as to the truth of the prophets. We have doubt as to the truth of the holy men and the wise men. And we have doubt as to the nature of reality. And how do we do away with this doubt? How do we make our faith strong? How do we turn around from being in a state of supreme misunderstanding of things and turn into a state of looking at and facing reality and coming to grips with the nature of existence? Well, for starters, we have to become very honest with ourselves. And we have to stop living an act. We have to stop living in a scenario that is dictated to us by the nature of our society. And the nature of our society, and most societies, is that what's important is what's going on in the present moment. And there is nothing beyond what the eyes can see and what the senses can touch, feel, hear, and smell. What happens for most men is we become enslaved by our sensory perception. And our sensory perception becomes our reality. And we define reality by our sensory perception. And this is where the great difficulty comes in. The fact that we limit our definition of reality to that which we can perceive through our senses. Our senses are a limited way to understand existence and only give us a partial answer to the truth. They do not bring into focus the truth of our existence and the truth of the trajectory that goes beyond the time of this life. Now, what happens is that we who too strongly feel our own hunger, feel our own needs, feel our own wants, feel our own desires, who are overwhelmed by them, we become separated from the rest of humanity. And we become isolated by ourselves, trying to feed ourselves. Now, in this feeding of ourselves, not just food, it's everything in the world. We try to consume the entire world, forgetting about everybody else in the world. Now, if it's true that there is a unity in all of existence, and that there is a unity among all of us, and that all men share a certain unity, then an overwhelming need to satisfy our needs to the exclusion of others, an overwhelming need to constantly be satisfying something within ourselves is going to separate us from unity. And when we become separated from the unity of all mankind, we become separated from reality. God is reality. If we separate ourselves from humanity, we become separated from God. When we enter into doubt, we become separated from God. When we enter into wars, we become separated from God. When we act as if we are supreme and we know everything, we become separated from God. There's something called a 12-step program, which has to do with alcoholic addiction. And it's understood that people will not turn away from their alcoholism until they have reached rock bottom, until they have reached a state that's so despicable that they recognize the despicable nature that they're in. But until they get to that point, they're not going to turn around. Well, do we have to become alcoholics to get to that point of understanding? Or can we, while we are rational, using our reason, understand the limitations of our being, understand the helplessness of our being, understand how in doing things, the true doer is not ourselves, but our Lord who does through us. Can we truly understand that? Can we enter into a state of humility that understands the truth that the doer is not ourselves? Can we give up relying on ourselves? Can we give up on the attachment that we have to all the needs within ourselves? Can we give up on those needs? Can we give up on those desires? Can we give up in our constant interplay with illusion? Can we be happy juggling new balls? We've been juggling illusion all our life. Can we move on from juggling illusion to beginning to juggle the qualities of Allah? Can they become what we are interested in? Can they become the forefront of our consciousness? Can they become that which we give our life over to? We worship our intentions. If our intention is wealth, we worship wealth. If our intention is fame, we worship fame. If our intention is power, we worship power. If our intention is mercy, we worship God. If our intention is compassion, we worship God. If our intention is justice, we worship God. So, what is it that we worship? What is it that we make the priority in our existence? What is it that we hold the most important? Or do we just spend our time confusing things and bouncing back and forth and not being able to move straight forward? Can we take God's commands without trying to wrestle with them in a way that puts them off or makes them more and more complicated so we never end up getting around to them? There's a story in the Bible and in the Quran about Allah telling people to sacrifice a heifer. And the command was quite simple. It was sacrifice a heifer. And this was at the time of Moses. And they implored, you have to tell us more. What kind of heifer is it? And is it an old heifer? Is it a young heifer? And the answer came, the heifer is not too old and not too young, of a middle age. And then they said, well, what did the heifer look like? What color is it? And they said, well, it should be a bright color. Some say it was red, some say it was yellow. And then they say, what kind of shape should the heifer be in? And then the response came, the heifer should be one who has never plowed a field, nor who has dragged water, but is fresh and is of full strength. And the questions kept coming and the answers kept coming. And finally, they sacrificed the heifer, but barely were they able to do that because they asked so many questions that they limited how many heifers were actually available to be sacrificed. We do the same thing in our lives. We need to be able to get a direct understanding of things. Illusion is without merit. God's qualities have merit. It's not much more complicated than that. Faith is without seeing. However, we are constantly asked to be shown. Can the ones who can't even withstand lightning ask to see God? Can the ones who cannot withstand thunder and the fear of illusion ask to see God? Don't we need to go to a place that is beyond fear? Don't we need to go to a place that is beyond the needs of this world? Don't we need to go to a place that is beyond hunger and is beyond desire? And how do we get to that place? What do we need to do to get to that place? Well, we have to sit down and create an internal intention. And that intention has to be strong enough to take us to the places where our Lord exists. And where does he exist? He exists everywhere. So we don't have to travel. We don't have to look for specific spots. There's the story of all the people in Nasruddin's village who were running off to Hajj. And Nasruddin was staying at home. And then he decided that he was going to go with them too. So he's riding his donkey and he gets to the group who are all going off to Hajj. And he's screaming, "I lost my donkey, I lost my donkey." And then the people in the village said, "But you're riding him." And he said, "I'm riding him in the same way you're going to wherever you're going to find God. You're already there. I'm on my donkey, you're with God." Can we get to the point where we understand that we are with God now? This is the moment. This is the time. This is the place. There's nowhere else to go. There's nowhere else to be. You're already there. Just become. Become at one with truth. Become at one with reality. Become at one with your Lord. Become at one with the understanding that he is always with us, whether we can see him or not. When we were with the Sheikh, we had this constant feeling that we were in a mode where we were protected because of our association with him. And we felt this very strongly. And we knew we could turn at any moment to him. We knew that he saw us even when we weren't near him. Well, now that the Sheikh has gone and passed, we have to understand that that which was the Sheikh still exists. Allah still exists. Allah never leaves. And any way that we turn, he is always with us. He always knows what we're doing, and he is always available to us to answer all of our inquiries, to answer all of our difficulties, and to resolve all of our situations. There is no need for fear. There is no need for trepidation. There is no need for anxiety. And we should understand that all of these things come from the connection of the elemental self to the elements that are around us and the machinations that they go on with each other. So we have to remove ourselves from that consciousness of need, from that consciousness of desire. All of these things are at play in the elemental forms. All of these things, even though they seem to be mental images, actually are elemental magnetisms that are coming from our body. We have to release ourselves from their hold. This is the prison that we're in illusion. And as long as we give in to all of these elemental longings and elemental needs, we will stay within the elemental world. And if we are going to find the truth and going to find reality, we have to go beyond the elemental world. We have to go into the world that is non-manifest, and it exists right here, right now, right beside us in this elemental world. So become conscious of the non-manifest. Focus on the non-manifest. Envision love. Envision Rahman and Rahim, mercy and compassion. Envision true justice. Concentrate on these things, and in that concentration, an intention will set up within us that will bring these non-form realities into being within us. And as this intention rises and rises within us, the commensurate wisdom to understand this intention will also rise within us. So let us ask our Lord to be free of this attachment to the world that we have. Ask our Lord to be released from being a slave of our sensory self, free from being a slave to our various hungers. Let us be able to come in touch with truth, in touch with reality, in touch with that which is non-manifest, but which is the truth of existence. O Lord, reveal to us your qualities, reveal to us your nature, reveal to us your light so that we can know truth, and do this on behalf of each and every one of us. Ameen. Ameen. Ya Rabbil Alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.